Okay everyone, Revit walls, let's have a look. Architecture tab, select wall, and let's have a look on some properties of this wall. In this template, by default, you're directed to basic generic 200 thick. Location line, this means that when you draw, you're actually defining wall center line. You have other options here, and I'd rather switch to finish face exterior. I find it very useful. The height of the wall is defined by base constraint, which in this case by default is set to level on which you are drawing. Top constraint by default in this template is unconstrained. Height 8 meters. I want you to switch it to level 2. So this will mean that I'm drawing with finish face exterior. The wall happens to start at level 1 and the top of this wall is hooked up to level 2. Let's go ahead and draw it. Any length. But I want you to pay attention to your snap. Snap in Revit is zoom sensitive. If you zoom out, you will notice that you actually snap to 1 meter. If you zoom in, so get closer to your detail, you will notice that your snap switches to, let's say, 10 centimeters. If you zoom in again, you will notice that your snap will actually go to a smaller value. See, so you're actually hooking up to a 10 millimeter intervals. So for now, let's zoom out a bit. Let's make that wall, let's say, 10 meters. Here we go. Escape, escape. Reselect this wall and you will notice that you have two active features here. One is your listening dimension that shows up. It indicates 10 meters. Reselect and let's overtype to 12,000 millimeters. Left click on the screen. You can actually regulate the length of this wall using the listening dimension feature. Another feature, switching exterior interior face of the wall. So if you made a mistake and you ended up with exterior face on the wrong side, it's a switch, it's a toggle key. Escape, escape. And I want you to make a few copies of this wall. So one of the ways to copy it is select the wall, press and hold Control, and drag the element to the side. And again, another way to copy, select the wall, under Modify, Copy, select any base point, copy to a new base point. Now, look how I'm going to use the feature of those listening dimensions. I'd like to reposition this wall in relationship to this one. Let's change it to 3 meters. I'd like to change position of this wall in relationship to this one. I'd like to change it to 2 meters. And for example, I'd like to move this one, but at this point I'm really interested in distance center to center. Look, left click and use this toggle option to reposition your listening dimension to a center of the wall, and then overtype listening dimension to, let's say, 4 meters. Okay, now let's make a section through those walls and let's review. Escape, escape. Let's go to that section. And I want you to pay attention to crop box. Now the crop box regulates how much of your drawing or of your model you can see in this particular view. You have 4 options here. You can actually crop and see the box. You can crop and hide the box. You can also do not crop and do not see the box, and you can do not crop but see the box. So depending on situation and how much of your model you want to see on this view, use one of those four combinations in between crop view, do not crop view, see the crop region, don't see the crop region. Alright, just to give you an example here, I'm going to crop the view and I'm going to stretch the crop box to this location here and this location here. Whoops, don't see level 2, don't see one of the walls. If I do not crop though, I see them, although my crop box is so teeny. So a good practice will be to have this clearly indicated. And I'm stretching this crop box because I'd like to create another level. So I'd like to crop the view and see the box. I'd like to go ahead and in this view under Architecture tab, I'm going to create another level, any height. Escape, escape. And I'd like to, as an example, I'd like to left click this wall and I'd like to change the height of this wall. So you can see I have a grip here, but really the exact way to handle it is this. Top constraint. I'd like to go to level 3. And this wall automatically attaches itself to level 3. Have a look on this. Left click here, and on this particular wall I'd like to have a few modifications. So let's say I have to cover my beams and I'd like to drop this wall to, let's say, -300 to below this level, and my top constraint would be, let's say, 1200 above level 2. So here we go. This wall is regulated by level 1 and level 2 with overrides. If I move this level, so I'm switching this level to, let's say, 5 meters, you can clearly see that all those walls follow the change. Move it and the walls get affected by this level. If on the other hand one of those walls would be unconnected to the level, and I move this level, you can clearly see that this is not affected. So use it to the advantage. Depending on task ahead of you, you might select unconstrained or connected walls, depending on the situation. Let's go to 3D view, and I want you to review another option that you have. Select one of the walls and go ahead and edit profile. This basically downgrades the entire wall to 2D drafting element. I want you to draw a line anywhere on this vertical and snap to horizontal line, and then I want you to go ahead and trim. Select portion of vertical, diagonal, portion of horizontal, diagonal, and finish, and escape, escape. So that's how you can modify a wall element, and you can actually make fancy shapes out of it. So edit profile, I'll do something like this, tangent arc, I'll go ahead and trim. I'll make another 3-point arc here, going in. I'm going to split element and trim. Always select portions of lines that you intend to keep. I'll select circle and I'll cut opening in it and finish, and voila, and you have your profile. So just remember, it has to be closed polyline, with no overlapping lines, no gaps, no intersecting lines, and then you're probably successful with edits. Important to understand that your wall will be a hosting element for basic Revit families such as door, or window. As you can see, no hosting, no window, you're denied. Once you select element, you can always swap the type. So I'm selecting window, and on type selector I'm swapping to another size. So from the library, whatever this library was, I just selected a larger size. Have a look on one situation here. I'm going to insert door into this wall here, no, this one here, and you'll probably see that this wall ended up above bottom of the wall. Why? Because the bottom of this one was running at -300, while the door is inserted at threshold level 0. So that's important to understand, that the door has a hard snap on horizontal datums. Now let's go back to the section view that we had. So this will be on my project browser, section 1, and I want you to swap the type of the wall to another type of the wall. So from basic generic 200 thick, I want you to reselect, let's say, exterior brick on metal studs. Not much of a change except for thickness of the wall, but in reality we know that this wall has layers. So here's an important feature. I want you to change level of detail from coarse to fine, and you'll see right away that this wall has number of layers that you don't see when you run coarse level of detail. So stay with this fine level of detail, but at the same time think about scale. Do you really want to show drywall thickness in 1 to 100? No. So that's why it's prepped that way. You can display in coarse level in smaller scales, and then when you're going into details, so let's say 1 to 20, yes, you'll obviously invoke fine level of detail to indicate all those layers. Now let's go back to plan view. So I'm going back to level 1. Same deal on this view. If I want to see this with layers, I would have to call fine level of detail, and to make sense out of it, I'll run 1 to 25. Look, if I select this wall, and let's say I've made a mistake and my exterior face ended up on the wrong side, here's my switch. So this flips around this exterior face drawing line that I invoked while drafting my wall. So finish face exterior was my governing line around which I can flip my wall. Now let's review another type of wall. I want you to switch to typical 3D view, and let's call up wall, but this time I want you to run curtain wall type storefront, again any length. This wall behaves slightly differently to typical walls, but you can also edit profile, and you can also direct this wall to be a certain height. So let's say top constraint, I'd like to switch it to level 3, and I'd like to stretch this wall. So once you selected the wall, you can select the blue grid, extend this wall. You can edit profile in a similar fashion that what you did with those walls. So I'm going to elect, for example, 3-point arc, and I'm going to re-edit the top of this wall. Escape, escape. I'm going to select this edge and delete and finish. One of the elements becomes redundant, so I agree to delete it. I just edited profile of this curtain storefront type wall. Important to understand, the technique to create door openings would be different than with typical wall. Here with a typical wall, you can select door and you can actually insert this door into the wall. However, cannot do this with curtain wall. Here's the technique that you can use. Select the grid line. So I'm using tab key. Here's my curtain wall grid. Left click, add remove, left click in the same location. This removes portion of the grid. Escape, escape. No grid, no mullion. I want you to take bottom mullion, unpin it, delete, unpin it, delete. So we're not getting threshold here. It's a dangerous thing, thresholds on exit doors. Now you have open glazing panel. I want you to select this glazing panel. I'm using tab key here. On the first tab, hit, select the glazing panel, unpin it, and I'm going to edit type, load from doors library. I'm going to select curtain wall double storefront, open, and OK. So here's my door. I don't see handles here because in that scale I'm running medium level of detail. If I switch to fine, yes, I see the handles, but in reality in 1 to 100, do I really want to see the handles? No. So just bear in mind, this is your logic here, scale and level of detail. If I go back to floor plan view, control tab, yes, the door is already there. So this is handy dandy, done. Another little item that you might pay attention to. Look, I want to extend this wall, so I'm going to stretch it. Escape, escape. I'm going to select wall, curtain wall storefront, from level 1 up to level 2, and I'm going to trace center line of a typical wall that I already did, and escape, escape. Have a look in 3D. So you can actually embed curtain wall within your typical wall, and as per previous example, select this wall and edit profile. So you can do some fancy shape. I'll go circle somewhere in the center here, escape, escape, and I will delete the squarish shape. So tab selects all connected elements, left click, delete, and finish. Delete redundant elements, and you have a nice design. If you would like to see the brick, obviously you have to display fine level of detail, but also you might want to display shaded view to clearly understand the material that's invoked. Now you might want to create your own wall type. Here's how it's done. It's really not that difficult. So I'll select this one, which was basic wall generic, 200 thick, no layers, and I'd like to create ICF with brick exterior. So the first thing you do is edit type, and you make duplicate. You don't want to edit template that's given. So I'm going to call it ICF 01, let's say. And under that name, I'm going to edit structure. Here, I would probably open preview, so it shows me the layers that I'm creating. And I'll build some additional layers. So, insert layer. This layer I'd like to move up, and I'll switch it from structure to substrate, level of importance 2. I'll insert another layer, and this will be my thermal air layer. So I'm going outside of the ICF structure. I'll add another layer, and I'll switch it to my exterior finish. That would be my brick. So now I'm handling thickness and material. Let's go from here again, or let's go from structure. So for, let's say, typical ICF 300 thick, I will need probably 180 millimeters of concrete inside of my ICF form. Substrate, that's my styrofoam. I'll use, let's say, 60 millimeters of rigid insulation. Thermal air, 1 inch, so let's say 25 millimeters. And brick veneer, let's make it 90 millimeters for brick veneer. Now, I'd like to insert another layer. This one would be going to the inside. So on the opposite side, on the interior side, I need substrate again. That would be my 60 millimeters rigid board. Insert another layer, and I'm switching this one to my finish, level of detail 5. It will be my drywall, so 12 millimeters thick. Now let's handle materials. Going from inside, left click. This directs you to material library, and let's type gypsum board. My substrate was rigid insulation board. My structure in ICF, obviously it's cast in place concrete. Here would be my rigid insulation board to the outside. My air barrier, or air gap I should say, sorry. And then my finish on the outside would be my brick. So you have your custom or customized wall section, ICF, concrete core structure and core boundaries, substrate rigid insulation outside and inside, air gap for ventilation of the assembly, and then your exterior brick, and on the inside you have your interior finish. If you have your preview open, then you can see all those layers as you create them. Agree to that change, agree to that change, and then let's go to either section or plan view to see what we've done. So here's your ICF that you just created, and obviously this ICF wall will behave in a similar fashion to your other walls. So if you have that unconnected, obviously it's not going to react to levels, but if you have this connected to any of the levels, it's just going to be driven by that level. It also hosts your doors and windows. So I had a little window here. I can insert my door. I can decide as to the door type. So this was single flush. In this library here, in this template, I just have few door types. So let's take this one for example, plug it in, escape, escape. Another way to define a wall is to apply it to the face of conceptual mass. So let's create in-place mass. It will be a simple shoebox rectangular shape. On level 1, create solid form and finish mass. Now I want you to jazz it up a bit, so let's stretch it up, but also left click, edit in place, reselect solid form. So tab to the point where you see form element, left click, switch on X-ray, and then add profile. Just one profile somewhere here. Reselect, so hit escape, escape, reselect one of the nodes and stretch it. So you have some odd shape. Select this one, push it in, just a notch. And then go ahead and finish mass. So you have a mass with uneven surfaces. Look what you can do. Go to Architecture tab, select Wall, select Curtain Wall, and obviously you can draw it. We did that before, right? So escape, escape, but this time I want you to try something like this. Expand wall, select wall by face, and then pick face of the mass that you created. If it's this storefront type, it will create error if you have uneven surface. So try the face of mass that's flat. One more time. Wall by face. Yes, it did generate. However, with some other types of walls, for example with a generic 200 that we had before, you will be probably successful. So try this. Generic 200, I'm selecting this face. Yes, it created uneven wall. So you can see that this actually follows face of the mass. Now you can also try something like this. Under Architecture tab, create Curtain System, and then select Uneven Surface and try to create System, and you'll probably be successful. Depending on type of this curtain wall system, you'll have different partitioning. Escape, escape. What I want to do is simply change the size of the glazing here, because this one is too big in comparison to the curvature. So I'm reselecting this wall, left click, I'm editing type of this wall, I'm making duplicate of this wall, and I'll make it 500 by, let's say, 500. That's the name of this new wall. And I'll actually redefine partitioning of it to fixed distance 500, fixed distance 500, and OK. so then I have much smaller glazing panels following curvature of this conceptual mask that I did. Now let's go back to a plan view again. Another thing that you should understand, I'm going to level 1, and I want you to show how walls intersect, how they behave when they intersect. Let's go to architecture, select wall. This time I want you to select fire rated interior partition. So let's go to interior partition, and let's select this one here, for example. So interior 1 hour partition, 138 millimeters thick, and make a little wall stretch that actually hooks up to this ICF that we just did, and escape. Make another copy of it, so I'm selecting it, I'm pressing and holding Control, and I'm dragging this wall. So I have 2 elements like this. Very often this is not what I want to see on working drawings. I'd like to have condition like this. Right click, disallow joint, bring it back. Because I'd like to run my fire rated drywall continuously, and the first stud is actually applied on the face of drywall. Happens all the time, and that's not reflecting this particular condition. So pay attention to this detail, because by default Revit cleans up intersections of walls, and if you want to achieve this condition, right click on the end and disallow the joint. There's also another way to do it, or to modify it, so try this. Copy this guy, press and hold Control, slide it below this one, and now I want you to review how this drywall here intersects. So I'll switch it, to make it clearer, I'll switch to, let's say, 1 to 10. Look, this layer of drywall and this layer of drywall cleans up with my drywall on ICF. But here's what I would like to do. I'll create another type of wall out of this. So edit type, I'll make duplicate out of it. So this is going to be 1 hour type 2. Click OK, and I'm going to edit structure, right? We did that before, so I'm doing a small change here. I'm changing finish, which is that gypsum board, but I'm switching this to finish type 1 with level of importance 4. I'll do the same here, so it's number 4, same here, and click OK, and click OK again. Here's what happens. Look, if you compare this connection and this connection, you can understand that level of importance affects how materials clean, or how materials intersect when you connect drywall. It's not going to have any effect here, but it will affect connecting walls with allowing the joints. Okay? Another kind of miscellaneous item, but also good to know. Let's go to 3D view. And let's create opening in the wall. So if I'm selecting the wall, you remember I can edit profile. There's also another way to do it. Under architecture tab, openings, wall opening. So this basically gives you an option to quickly create a rectangular opening in the wall, the archway. Okay, it will behave in the same or similar fashion as your profile edit, but it has nothing to do with this technique. It is simply a separate element. So if I hover over it, I can modify it, or I can simply delete it. So it's another way to create quick rectangular openings in my typical wall. If you have curved wall and you select wall opening in this type of wall, you will be not successful. So you have to have a typical wall to do it. Oh,